She wasn't possessed. At least, not in the way you think. Buried beneath centuries of dust, cloistered behind ancient stone walls, Alucarda doesn't begin like a horror film. It unravels like a forgotten curse whispered in a dead language. There are no jump scares, no formulaic priests brandishing crosses. Instead, there are bleeding nuns, shrieking rituals, and a question that no one dares answer. What if this wasn't evil, but divinity misinterpreted? Shot in Mexico but banned in parts of Europe, Alucarda presents itself as a possession film but never explains who or what is doing the possessing. The camera lingers too long. The actresses scream too real. The rituals feel too precise, as if borrowed from some book that was never meant to be opened again. Tina Romero claimed she dreamt of her character long after filming ended, but no one ever asked what those dreams meant. Perhaps they were never dreams at all. The film was marketed as Mexico's answer to The Exorcist, but critics didn't know what to do with it. Religious horror is supposed to offer catharsis. Alucarda offers only corruption. It doesn't end with redemption, it ends with fire. And buried beneath all of that is something stranger. A production that veered into obsession, a cast that may have crossed a line without knowing it, and a story that was never meant to be understood. These are 20 weird facts you didn't know about Alucarda. 1977. Fact 1. The film opens with a funeral and never recovers from it. The first image you see is a coffin being lowered into the earth. It doesn't belong to a villain, a monster, or even a protagonist. It's the mother of a child we haven't met yet. And just like that, Alucarda announces itself not with plot, but with death. There is no exposition, no comforting hand to explain the stakes. Just an orphan girl standing at the edge of a grave, with the wind howling like it's trying to pull her in too. This is not just mourning, it's initiation. The woman buried is never fully explained, but her death is the first of many that feel like sacrifices. And from this very first scene, the film treats death not as an end but as a portal, a transformation, a trade. Director Juan Lopez Moctezuma doesn't frame this burial with sentimentality. There are no tears, only silence, dread, and stone. The camera lingers just long enough to suggest something unfinished, as if the earth is being asked to take something it can't digest. And just beneath that earth lies the thesis of the film. No one is safe from being offered up, whether to God, the devil, or something far older. Maybe the first grave wasn't even for the mother. Maybe it was for the last part of the child that would remain human. Fact 2. The orphanage isn't a home, it's a labyrinth. Most horror films use institutions to protect their characters. Hospitals, churches, schools. But in Alucarda, the orphanage is a trap disguised as salvation. The nuns don't offer kindness, they issue commands. The rooms don't feel safe, they feel hollow, lined with relics that seem to whisper. And the other girls don't smile, they watch. From the moment Justine arrives, the place radiates a kind of false holiness, like a museum built over a battlefield. Every corridor is lined with crucifixes, but they're not comforting, they're invasive, nearly weaponized. Even the colors are drained. White robes, pale walls, light that never seems to touch the floor. This isn't an orphanage, it's a place for transformation, or worse, indoctrination. Moctezuma's decision to set most of the film inside these walls makes every moment feel claustrophobic. And when Alucarda emerges, it's clear she's not a normal girl. She speaks in riddles. She touches the relics with disdain. She laughs too loudly in rooms that should be silent. But here's the twist. What if the orphanage didn't corrupt her? What if she came to corrupt it? Fact 3. The first friendship feels like a ritual. Alucarda and Justine's first meeting is quiet, but the energy between them is anything but. They don't act like two girls meeting for the first time. They move like mirrors drawn to each other by something older than language. Within minutes, they are inseparable. And that intimacy, so immediate and so unspoken, feels orchestrated, not natural. They don't talk about their past. They talk about secrets. They whisper vows. They shed clothes. What starts as a friendship evolves, almost hypnotically, into a kind of pact, one that involves blood. And while the film never labels their bond, it treats it as sacred, or profane, or both. Tina Romero, who played Alucarda, once said she and Susana Camini rehearsed together in total isolation to create the intensity of that connection. But some crew members claimed that even between takes, the line between character and actress blurred. The film never tells us if Alucarda seduces Justine or if they were both chosen. All we know is that after they meet, nothing ever returns to normal. Was it friendship, love, or a possession disguised as both? Fact 4. The relics aren't just decorations, they're watching. In most religious films, relics are props, silent symbols of faith. In Alucarda, they feel alive. When Justine and Alucarda first enter the forbidden crypt, they aren't met with silence, they're met with whispers, not from the walls, but from the objects themselves. Skulls, chains, masks, statues of saints that look more like witnesses than guardians. The camera doesn't treat these objects as set dressing. It isolates them, holds them in tight, almost intimate frames, as if the film is asking permission to show them. Production designer Jose Luis Aguilar sourced real religious artifacts from abandoned churches for the shoot. Some were centuries old, and some, rumor had it, were never meant to leave the places they were found. Tina Romero later said that entering the crypt set made her nauseous, like the air was too heavy to breathe. But the most disturbing thing isn't what the relics do, it's what they suggest. Maybe the evil didn't enter the crypt. Maybe it was sealed in until now. Fact 5. The blood pact wasn't acting, it was instinct. In one of the film's most unsettling scenes, Alucarda and Justine cut their palms and pressed them together, swearing eternal loyalty. It's a moment of adolescent rebellion until the blood touches the floor. Then the wind changes, the candles flicker, and the camera, for the first time, trembles. What was scripted as a symbolic gesture came off far too visceral. According to a surviving production note, the blood was supposed to be fake, but the actresses insisted on pricking their own fingers to feel the moment. That single decision sent the energy of the set spiraling. Several lights failed during the next scene. A reel jammed in the camera. One technician even refused to return to work the next day, claiming he saw something behind the girls during the shot, something that wasn't part of the crew. Director Moctezuma never acknowledged these stories, but in private, the makeup supervisor claimed he saw Romero and Kamini whispering together in Latin, a language neither of them spoke. Was it method acting, or was something answering the ritual? Fact 6. The exorcism wasn't in the script at first. Midway through the film, Justine begins to unravel. Her skin breaks out in lesions, her eyes cloud, she levitates. And so, the nuns call in an exorcism. But here's the twist. There was no exorcism in the original draft. The scene was added late, after Romero and Kamini allegedly told Moctezuma that the story needed a breaking point, something to tear open the veil. What resulted was a scene so raw, it feels less filmed than summoned. The priests scream invocations, not in Latin, but in a broken mix of Spanish and ancient dialects. The ropes snap. Justine bleeds from the eyes, and then silence. Cinematographer Miguel Garzón said that what he filmed that day didn't match what was in the script. The dialogue changed, the blocking changed. It felt like we were just there, recording something already happening. And the most haunting part? The film never shows Justine being saved, only restrained, controlled, silenced. Which raises a question: was this an exorcism or a punishment? And who exactly was afraid of whom? Fact 7. The exorcism room was a real chapel, and maybe still cursed. The exorcism scene wasn't shot on a set. It took place inside an abandoned 17th century chapel on the outskirts of Mexico City. The location was chosen for its untouched decay, as Moctezuma put it. But what the crew found inside went beyond cinematic atmosphere. The walls were blackened by centuries-old soot, and beneath the altar lay bones, human bones, later confirmed by a local historian as the remains of plague victims. Instead of clearing them out, the crew left them intact, building the altar above them. From that point on, the shoot suffered interruption after interruption. Multiple lights shattered. 2 crew members fainted. And the sound recorder allegedly caught a woman's voice praying when no women were present. None of this made it into the production notes, but in the final cut of the scene, you can hear something faint behind the priest's chants. Not a whisper, not a growl, something layered. Many claimed it was just audio interference. Others weren't so sure. After the shoot, the chapel was sealed shut. No other production has been allowed to film there since, and no one has asked to. Fact 8. Justine didn't die from possession, she died from the exorcists. In horror tradition, death comes from demons. In Alucarda, death comes from doctrine. Justine doesn't explode, she doesn't become monstrous. She simply fades bleeding, trembling, screaming as the nuns pin her down with crosses and prayers. The camera refuses to cut away. It lingers on her suffering, on the sweat of the priests, on the cracked tiles beneath her body, and then she's gone. Tina Romero later said that Susana Kamini, Justine, refused to talk for hours after filming that scene. She wasn't pretending, Romero said. She was gone somewhere. But perhaps the most chilling detail is what didn't happen. There was no triumphant music, no sign of salvation, just silence. As if the film itself is saying, You didn't just watch an exorcism, you watched an execution. It leaves the viewer with a question the church never answers. Who saves the saved from their saviors? Fact 9. The blood that returned wasn't supposed to. After Justine's death, the film shifts. Something comes back, but not in a traditional resurrection. It's not Justine's soul that returns. It's her blood. The scene shows Alucarda discovering Justine's body, wrapped and stored beneath the convent. But the camera notices something strange. Her wounds are bleeding again, fresh, active, open. The crew assumed it was a continuity mistake until Moctezuma told them to keep shooting. He leaned into the moment. Later, he claimed the scene had to stay because blood has memory. That single quote became infamous among cult horror fans. But the legend grew darker. A production assistant claimed that during that shoot, the blood bags used on the corpse began to inflate instead of deflate, even though no pressure was applied. Whether mechanical error or myth, the image remains. A body that bled after death, a soul that refused to leave. And that moment was when Alucarda stopped being a film about possession and started being a film about unfinished rituals. Fact 10. The first time Alucarda screams something else, screams back. After Justine's death, Alucarda does not mourn in silence. She screams, not in fear, but in rage. Her cries are raw, sustained, almost inhuman. The scene was so intense that Tina Romero collapsed immediately after filming, requiring oxygen. But what disturbed the crew wasn't her performance. It was what they heard on playback. When the audio reel was reviewed, the scream wasn't alone. Underneath it, buried in the static, was another voice, lower, warped, not quite human. Technicians blamed it on magnetic tape distortion. Moctezuma blamed it on energy release. Romero? She never commented. But sound designer Rafael Campos said something that stuck with fans for decades. It sounded like something answering, like something had been waiting for her voice. From this point in the film, Alucarda stops being a character. She becomes a vessel, and what she carries isn't defined, just unleashed. Fact elves. The Noon's punishment rituals were taken from real texts. One of the most haunting sequences in Alucarda shows the nuns self-flagellating, whipping themselves while chanting fractured prayers. This wasn't stylized horror. These rituals were lifted directly from obscure 15th century penitential texts sourced by Moctezuma during his research. Some of the chants were in Latin, others were in a dialect lost to modern religious study. A visiting theologian later reviewed the footage and claimed the language resembled early pre-Vatican Spanish monastic codes, many of which were outlawed for their extremity. But here's the real twist. Several of the actresses were reportedly unaware that the texts were real. They believed it was horror gibberish. Only months after filming did Romero discover that some of the lines she recited were actual invocations of purification used during the Inquisition. One cast member refused to return after the flagellation scene, not because of the violence, but because she claimed she felt watched by something ancient as they chanted. Maybe the film didn't recreate a ritual. Maybe it reactivated one. Fact 12. The possession scene used sound frequencies meant to disturb the audience. In a pivotal scene, Alucarda is fully overcome. She levitates, convulses, and begins to laugh, not like a girl, but like something breaking through her. But the most disturbing part isn't what you see, it's what you feel. Composer Anthony Guevara, working with the sound team, admitted to embedding low-frequency audio tones, subsonics, between 17 Hz and 19 Hz, designed to induce discomfort in the human body. These are frequencies not consciously heard, but physically felt. Chest tightness, unease, even mild panic. At the time, this technique was almost unheard of in horror. Today, it's used in psychological thrillers to unnerve viewers on a subconscious level. Test audiences reportedly walked out during that scene, complaining of headaches and nausea. One woman fainted, another vomited, yet none could explain why. There was no gore, no monster, just a girl, laughing into the void and the void laughing back through the speakers. Was the possession real? Maybe not. But the discomfort it summoned definitely was. Fact 13. The Black Mass wasn't supposed to be filmed that way. Midway through the film, Alucarda descends into a scene that feels more like a recovered cult tape than scripted cinema, a Black Mass, where the sacred is inverted and the profane becomes divine. Nuns levitate, crosses burn, and Alucarda, now fully transformed, stands bathed in blood, declaring herself beyond salvation. What most viewers don't realize is that this scene wasn't choreographed. Moctezuma gave the cast only vague direction. Lose yourselves. The result was a 12-minute unscripted sequence where the actors were told to improvise possession, surrender, worship, or revolt, depending on what moved them. Cinematographer Miguel Garzón recalled, "We weren't filming actors anymore. We were documenting trance." Several props, including the bleeding crucifix, malfunctioned during the scene, yet the cast kept performing, incorporating the chaos into the ritual. When asked later if the scene had religious meaning, Moctezuma replied, "If it disturbed you, then it did, and the scene still disturbs, not because of what it shows, but because of what it doesn't explain." Fact 14. Justine's return breaks the film's own rules intentionally. In most horror stories, death is final. In Alucarda, Justine comes back, but not as a ghost, a demon, or a victim. She simply appears, alive, bleeding, changed. The film never explains how. There's no spell, no resurrection, no dramatic reveal. She's just there. Eyes black, voice different, movements inhuman. Susanna Camini's performance shifts entirely in these scenes. Her pacing, her rhythm, her posture. And that's because she was never given new direction. Moctezuma simply told her, "You're no longer Justine, but you remember her." What follows is unsettling. Justine doesn't scream or beg. She recites fragments of earlier dialogue, but out of order, like memories looping incorrectly. Was she revived, or was something using her face? Either way, her return signals something terrifying. Not everyone who leaves comes back wrong. Some come back too right, as if they were never supposed to die in the first place. Fact 15. The final confrontation was lit with real fire and real panic. In the film's climax, the convent burns. Holy icons melt, blood boils, and Alucarda stands at the center, laughing through the flames. Most productions would simulate this with visual effects or controlled studio fire. Alucarda didn't. The crew set parts of the set ablaze for real. No digital tricks, no post-production enhancement, only layers of soaked wood, gasoline, and hope. Tina Romero stood within feet of actual open flame while delivering her final monologue. The heat was so intense that her dress caught fire briefly before being extinguished by a crew member off-screen. She didn't break character. In fact, Moctezuma kept that take. The scene ends not with a resolution, but a collapse of story, of space, of meaning. And the irony? After the fire, there's no salvation, no sign that good won, only ashes. Which leads to the question the church never likes to hear. What if hell wasn't punishment but the only honest place left? Fact 16. The last prayer is spoken by the wrong person. In the chaos of the final sequence, the convent burns and bodies fall. But just before the flames consume the screen, one voice cuts through, a prayer. It's whispered, measured, reverent, but it doesn't come from a priest, or a nun, or a survivor. It comes from Alucarda. Tina Romero delivers it with an eerie calm, in near-perfect Latin. But here's the twist. She was never taught that line. The script contained no Latin prayer for her. According to production notes, Romero improvised a passage she claimed to have heard in a dream the night before. When translated, the prayer reads, "Let the light of the old ones fall upon the sacred ash. Let the blood remember the path." No theologian could place it in any known scripture, and some suspected it wasn't a prayer at all, but a summoning disguised as absolution. So who was Alucarda praying to in her final breath? God, the devil, or something older, forgotten, and now remembered? Fact 17. The film never shows her body, and that's on purpose. When the flames die down, we see the aftermath: charred stone, broken relics, and silence. But one thing is missing. Alucarda's body is never shown. There's no corpse, no final shot of her face, not even bone. Juan López Moctezuma was adamant about this choice. In interviews, he said, "The body doesn't matter. It was never hers anyway." This decision created decades of speculation. Some claimed it implied survival. Others believed it confirmed transcendence. A few theorized that the entire film was her ritual of shedding form altogether, not a death, but an ascension into something incorporeal. What's certain is this. In a film obsessed with flesh, blood, and suffering, the absence of a body speaks louder than any crucifix. And maybe that's the point. If Alucarda was a vessel, then by the end, the vessel had done its job, and what it carried had moved on. Fact 18. The final shot breaks the fourth wall, but no one noticed. In the film's final seconds, the camera lingers on a hallway, empty, scorched, echoing with distant chants. Then, without fanfare, it pans slowly to what appears to be a charred doorway. And for just one frame barely noticeable unless paused, someone walks past the edge of the frame, looking directly into the lens. This figure wears no costume, doesn't match any character, and wasn't in the shooting script. Fans have speculated for years. Was it a crew member accidentally caught on film, a symbolic gesture, or a last-minute insertion by Moctezuma to suggest that the story was still watching us back? No answer was ever given. The original negative was lost in a fire in 1984. Only VHS copies survived, and in every version, the figure remains. No name, no explanation, just one final breach of reality. Maybe the camera was never looking into the story. Maybe the story was always looking out. Fact 19. The director never explained the film because he didn't believe he wrote it. Most filmmakers love to explain their work. Juan Lopez Moctezuma refused. He gave interviews. He spoke about his influences, The Exorcist, Jodorowsky, surrealism, religious trauma, but when asked about Alucarda's meaning, he'd deflect, laugh, sometimes go silent. In one rare interview from 1981, he said something cryptic. "I don't think I created her. I think she was waiting to be shown." According to multiple crew members, Moctezuma revised the script constantly during filming, often based on dreams or sudden visions. He carried a notebook of symbols, some of which were never translated. He never shot a traditional ending. He said it wasn't necessary. The ritual completes itself. That's all. When asked who or what Alucarda represented, his only response was, "That depends on what she wants to be when you watch her. Not what I wrote, not what I filmed. What she wants." Fact Asarim. Alucarda is Dracula, spelled backwards, but that's not the real secret. Everyone eventually notices the name trick. Alucarda is Dracula reversed. It's clever. It's gothic. It feels like an homage. But that's the trap. Moctezuma confirmed the naming was deliberate, but not because of Dracula. In fact, he said the reference was too obvious. What he wanted was to plant a false direction, a decoy, because while the name hints at vampirism, bloodlust, gothic horror, Alucarda never bites anyone. She doesn't drink blood. She doesn't stalk at night. She burns. She screams. She destroys faith. Some theorists believe her name is more alchemical, that Alucarda isn't a female Dracula, but rather a cipher for anti-form, a reversal, not of a person, but of a structure. Church, purity, obedience. In that reading, Alucarda isn't a character at all. She's what happens when everything sacred is turned inside out quietly, beautifully, and without permission. Bonus fact. What happened inside that coffin was real. Years after Alucarda's release, rumors began to circulate about the opening funeral scene, the one with the coffin, the orphan, and the uneasy silence. Most assumed it was a prop, a fake body, a routine moment of cinematic death. But one assistant prop master speaking anonymously in a 1992 underground horror zine claimed otherwise. That wasn't a dummy. That was a real body, from a morgue. It was supposed to be a favor, a rental no one tracked. The crew, he said, was sworn to silence. No one touched the coffin but Moctezuma and the cinematographer. No second takes, no lighting adjustments. When asked why they'd use a real corpse, the answer was, to open the ritual correctly. No one ever confirmed the story. The original production logs are missing, and Romero herself denied it, then paused and added, "I never looked inside." But if it were true, if the film really began with death, not just as theme, but as sacrifice, then maybe it wasn't just fiction at all. Maybe the camera didn't capture a performance. Maybe it witnessed an offering. If this film left you more disturbed than entertained, you're not alone. Alucarda was never meant to comfort, it was meant to linger. In silence, in symbols, in screams you almost didn't hear. Tell us in the comments. Was Alucarda a victim or a ritual made flesh? And more importantly, who lit the fire?